I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I am joined by Mr. David Stephan. He is the VP of Operations for Truehope Canada and has a wealth of knowledge about the health food industry in general, and of course, the Truehope products. Over the past 9 years, David has been a keynote speaker at many of the top health shows across Canada. And over the past 19 years, he has worked extensively in the field of mental health and delivered hundreds of presentations at various venues and events. His main organization, Truehope Canada, is a mind and body based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non invasive nutritional means. So he's here today to help share a little bit more about Truehope Canada and what offers and benefits it has given to him in his life. So, David, thank you so much for coming on. I cannot wait to hear this today.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for you using your platform today to be able to share a very controversial message, actually, but a very profound message that will serve to be a benefit to many of your listeners today.
So, David, kind of take me back to the beginning, kind of share how this journey kind of began for you. What was childhood like growing up for you?
Oh wow, that's an interesting question. There's 10 of us that my mom and dad had 9 children, and then they adopted one more. So life was rambunctious, but couple, the vast amount of children under one roof with the fact that there was a major prevalence of mental illness, and things really got exciting. We were known as basically the exciting home where the action took place on our neighborhood. And we always thought we were wondering why the other families were so boring, but it's just that we were into so much stuff, destruction wise and all that. And so that was the family situation that I grew up in, was a family plagued with mental illness. Now, I never met my grandfather because 5 years before I was born, he ended up committing suicide in the late 1970s. And my mother, in about 1983, began to really suffer with bipolar depression, like quite bad. Some days she didn't get out of bed because of how depressed she was. Some days she wouldn't go to bed till 2, 3, 4 in the morning because of how manic she was. So there's this real roller coaster effect, the high highs, the low lows, up and down, and you never knew what version of mom you were going to get, as she was a rapid cycler. And so we ended up uprooting. My father sold a prominent business in mid 1993. And so by this point in time, I'm 10 years old. And things got stressful pretty quick because it was a pretty rapid move, largely due to catering to my mother with her bipolar disorder. She needed a change of scenery. And my father was well established where he was, and we ended up moving 10 hours away and starting over again. And so there was financial stress. There was some other stresses involved in the whole situation that actually the first encounters that we had with the government in relation to Revenue Canada here in Canada, it's the same as the IRS in the US. And there were some issues that were rising up there due to some wrongful activity in relation to the government, actually. And so it put us in a real bad position financially. And my mother, going through all of these stressful situations and already having the undertones of bipolar disorder, decided to go to the doctor in January of 1994. She received a prescription for Prozac. Now, Prozac at this point in time, 1994, it's a pretty new medication. It's one of the new blockbuster medications of SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And she ends up getting onto this medication that was supposed to help her with her situation. Well, it turns out that in the approval process, when these drug manufacturers are looking to get an FDA approval or a Health Canada approval, they're putting out multiple studies, and then they're picking the best studies and throwing out the rest, including all of the damning evidence that comes with those studies. And that's exactly what the situation was, where there was known evidence that Prozac would increase your risk of suicide by at minimum 2 times, but anywhere up to 8 to 12 times, depending on the situation. Now, my mother got on the Prozac, and 3 weeks later, she took her own life, leaving behind 9 children that were all suffering with mental health condition already. And then the trauma of the loss of our mother just made things even worse. And so there was two of my siblings that were really struggling bad. One was in and out of the psych ward on a regular basis. My older sister, Autumn, and at that point in time, she was 22 years old and had a 3-year-old son and was on a cocktail of medications, Haldol, Rivotril, Ativan, Cogentin, and Risperidol. And so she's not doing well. She's in and out of the psych wards. And when she's not in the psych ward, she's on 24-hour supervision because at times she's obsessing about killing herself and her 3-year-old son, thinking that that was somehow appropriate. My brother, just older than me, my brother Joseph, 15 years old, homicidal, suicidal, on weapons charges with the RCMP, stockpiling weapons as he can get his hands on them. And he is always in trouble. Just basically the next schoolyard shooting waiting to happen. And he's on a large dose of lithium, and he's not compliant because he hates the way that it makes him feel. But without it, he's completely off his rocker. And so my father is exhausting everything that's available to him at this point in time when he sees that his children are going down the same road that their grandfather went down, the same road that their mom went down. And so my father is exhausting everything available to him to get the best of help available in the pharmaceutical realm, right? In the psychiatric industry, if you will. And he meets with the head psychiatrist of the Foothills Hospital in Calgary, Alberta in early 1995. So just over a year after my mother had taken her life. And he begins to tell the head psychiatrist about how bad things are at home and how everybody's fearing for their lives from Joe. I mean, the death threats are it's a regular basis. And we're actually concerned that he's going to follow through with it. He's incredibly violent, volatile, absolutely volatile. And so she just said, Mr. Stephan, spare me the details. I work with thousands of clients a year, and I hear this very often. It's not going to do you any good to belabor this. And he said, okay, well, surely there has to be a better answer. And she finally just laid into him and said, Mr. Stephan, you need to face the reality that this is as good as it's going to get. You have the best of medications available to you, and that bipolar disorder doesn't go away. And often in time, it gets worse. She referenced the DSM-4, opened up to bipolar disorder, read that it was a recurrent disorder, and said, look, like this is as good as it's going to get. And you need to actually face the reality that someday you may have to plan more funerals. It wasn't what my father was looking to hear, but it's what he needed to hear because it would ultimately set him on a path to making a profound discovery. In fact, scientifically validated to date, the most profound discovery in the field of mental health in relation to correcting serious mental health conditions and identifying that these mental health conditions that have such an incredible stigma to them were nothing more than nutrient deficiency disorders. That's it. nutrient deficiency disorders. You don't have the right nutrients, you don't produce the right neurotransmitters and hormones, you end up with mood dysregulation, depression, anxiety, ADHD, that type of thing. And so I've gotten a little ahead of myself there. We'll get to that point. But so what ends up happening is in mid 1995, he's talking to people in the community, asking them what they knew about mental illness because he's been left with no hope whatsoever within within psychiatry. And so he's hearing a lot of stories, but he's never hearing a story of anybody getting better. Nobody's getting well. No, adult children still living in their parents' basements, unable to function, unable to hold down relationships, unable to hold a job, that type of thing. And he's hearing these stories, but he's never hearing a story of somebody else and coming out of it, recovering and going on to live a really productive life, with, having their own family of their own and thriving and just doing well. And so he comes to this realization that there was no known answer for mental illness. And so, out of desperation, he began to spend a significant amount of time in fasting and prayer and meditation, seeking for some kind of divine inspiration that would restore his family. And, nothing happened overnight. There was no miracle, there was no writing on the wall. But he persistently did this because he couldn't stand to have another suicide in the home. And by November of 1995, he had had a bunch of information come across his desk in essence in relation to nutrition. Even though he was already trying stuff with Joe, he had tried flax oil that somebody had recommended, magnetic therapy, Tahitian noni juice. He was trying everything, and nothing was working. But he was listening to the set of tapes called "Dead Doctors Don't Lie," and it was really talking about the premise of disease and what's at the root of disease. And it primed him for what he was going to hear when, as a property manager over 26 large buildings in southern Alberta, Canada, he's walking down a hallway one day with a colleague talking about replacing carpets. And he's overcome with this impression. You need to tell your colleague about what's going on at home. And so he did. And his colleague, David Hardy, had something really interesting to say. He said, Tony, I've never dealt with mental illness, so I can't relate to you there. He says, however, I spent over 20 years in the animal feed industry, formulating feed for hogs across Western Canada and the Western United States. And we saw something commonplace in the hog pens called ear and tail biting syndrome, where these hogs have become irritable with each other and they bite chunks of their ears and tails off each other. And if you didn't pen them away from each other, they'd actually kill each other. This is hyper irritability, like clearly, right? If a human was exhibiting those types of symptoms. And he says, we learned that you could completely eradicate that condition by simply putting the proper nutrition into their feed. And in that moment, my father had this confirmation. He knew it was the answer. And it's a good thing that he had the confirmation because they went down to a health food store shortly following this conversation and went and picked up a bunch of different vitamin and mineral supplements to put Joseph onto them. And they did, and it didn't work. And so, had my father not had that confirmation, it would have just been one more checkbox. Oh, flax oil on its own didn't do it. Oh, Tahitian noni juice didn't do it. Right? Magnetic therapy didn't, right? All these good things. Now it'd be vitamins and minerals don't do it. But because he had that confirmation, they persisted. And it would be just over 2 months later, on January 18th of 1996, that 4 products would arrive from across the US border. 4 products that were quite similar in nature to what they'd already been using, but they were being processed in a different way, where the minerals were one, being balanced, and two, they were made bioavailable through chelation, as well as a colloidal mineral supplement. And so they use this comprehensive 4 product blend and they put Joseph onto it. So colloidal mineral, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus supplement, a multivitamin mineral supplement, once again, all chelated minerals other than the colloidal mineral, and then grapeseed extract. They put Joseph onto these 4 products, and within 5 days, he said it was like a fog lifted, and he could now see what was right and wrong. So this is an interesting, you know, um, revelation in itself. You can really get philosophical on it that Joseph, suffering with this mental health condition, was completely incognizant of his behavior and the effect that it was having on everybody around him. He had no self-awareness until he got enough nutrition into him that all of a sudden he could look at his behavior, self-reflect, and say, whoa, maybe it isn't everyone else that has the problem. Maybe it's my behavior that's the problem. Maybe I'm causing these issues. And so, by nature of that, his behavior started to change. Within 5 days, he was now starting to come around. Within 30 days, he would have no longer received diagnosis for bipolar disorder because he was having normal good days and normal bad days, but not the high highs into mania and psychosis, and not the low lows into incredible depression that's just debilitating. So he was now going into a normalized stage, but he wasn't 100% well. But as time went on, he got more and more stable. The longer that he was on the nutrients, the more that his body corrected these particular situations or these circumstances that were leading him to not be thinking clearly. And so now my father wanted to get Autumn onto these supplements, and she wasn't willing, like at all. She'd been dealing with a lot of psychiatrists, specialists in her situation, and she lived 5 hours north of us up in Edmonton, Alberta. And that's where she would attend the psych ward on a regular basis. And her psychiatrist said, if you rock the boat, if you play around with your medication, you're going to die. And she took that very seriously. So when my father phones her up and says, hey, we've got a solution. It worked for Joe. It's going to work for you. She wasn't willing to listen to that. In fact, at that point in time, she probably thought that my dad, of all people, thinking he had this discovery that the psychiatrist didn't have, she was probably thinking that he needed some psychiatric help himself, right? Operating in like some form of delusion or something, right? And so she wasn't willing to entertain the idea. And I can't blame her, really. Like her dad's an engineer, right? Like that's what my dad does. He was a boiler room engineer and a property manager, and that's what I grew up with, right? And now all of a sudden he's got this solution between him and David Hardy. They've come up with this solution, right? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, but it worked for Joe. And so remember that she had to be on 24-hour supervision when she wasn't in the psych ward. Well, her husband had to work a night shift at a factory about a month after Joe got well. So she had to come and stay with us for a week. And a day and a half into her stay, she had a severe panic attack, went suicidal. And my father just said, look, we're not doing this. You're getting onto these supplements. They work for Joe. It's going to work for you. And he got her onto the supplements. And her husband was livid. And it's a real good thing there was a 5 hour drive between the two of them. Otherwise, I'm sure it would have been more than words. Here, you know, his father-in-law is now messing with his wife's medications, and she's unstable even when she's on these 5 medications. And so 5 days later, he comes to pick her up, and he sees already profound changes. Now, I'm not talking about her being well because she was so far from being well. But the fact that the hallucinations that she had showed up with were gone, that she was now taking care of her own hygiene because she would see things in reflective glass. So she'd actually avoid the bathrooms. And so hygiene was an issue for her. Now she's taking care of herself. Now she's able to start conversating with a lot more logic and reasoning being employed. And he sees these changes. And so they continued on with the supplements, and they were able to get her off of her medications within 45 days. They had her completely off that cocktail of 5 medications. And at that point in time, now she's going grocery shopping on her own. Like this is something that we take for granted, and yet she couldn't do before. And so she's grocery shopping on her own. And if we were to fast forward, she's never had to visit a psych ward again. She's never had to get on a psychiatric medication again. And so, and that this is back in 1996. And she went on to have 3 beautiful daughters with her faithful husband after all the turmoil and strife they'd gone through. And she was given the recommendation from the doctors that she have an operation to prevent her from getting pregnant because of the destruction that would occur to that fetus from those 5 medications. And she's really glad that she never took that advice because she went on and had 3 beautiful daughters afterwards, and then went on to write an incredible book called The Promise of Hope, and it was available in chapters in Costco across Canada, available on Amazon, that type of thing. And so really quite a profound story. And my father's prayers had been answered at that point in time. And he had a great job already. There was no concept of business at this point in time. So this is 1996. Life is great. Everybody's changing, like the dynamics of our relationships are changing because now Joe is well, so we don't have to approach him the same way that we once did. You can approach him on a normal basis rather than, tiptoeing or walking on eggshells around him. Um, Autumn, my older sister, is now being a caregiver to her 3-year-old son rather than needing to have be provided with care herself. And so everything's beginning to change, and my family's receiving the restoration that my father had been so desperately pleading for. And that was just phenomenal. And I've been speaking a bit here. Do you want me to continue on with how we get to the point where we have gun drawn raid and all sorts of stuff on the company after studies were um, performed on the products that would eventually come about because of this, or did you want to interject at all?
No, I was thinking that, do you have an idea of, like, say that this supplement didn't come in and all this kind of treatment didn't come at the right time, where do you think your family would have been today if this treatment wasn't introduced back in the 90s to your siblings, and was able to make the Joseph and Autumn feel better? If it wasn't around, where do you think your family would be right now?
Wow, that's a profound question. I've never actually gotten that question, but when I reflect on that, and I've reflected on that personally from time to time, and it brings me to an incredible state of gratitude. But I can tell you one, there would most definitely have been more suicides. There would have been major brokenness, brokenness in marriages, um, a lot of drug abuse would have definitely occurred with how severe the mental illness was in our homes. I have no idea where I'd be. I'd be behind bars because of the amount of rage that I had growing up. That would have led me to a really bad place at some point in time when, I put on a little more weight and a little more beef, that type of thing. That rage would have been an incredible weapon, or my body would become an incredible weapon for the rage. There's all sorts of, like all I know is that there would be a major wake of destruction following each one of us, every one of us, the 9 siblings that were all blood siblings, because remember, out of the 10, one was adopted, and it just wasn't good. It wasn't good as a child. I mean, there was a lot of brokenness in the home, literally. Like the evidence was there, holes in the walls, just destruction, right? That's what I grew up in. And by the time that I was moving out, a lot of that had already corrected to a significant degree, that it was a different environment than what I was subjected to in my earlier years. So, um, yeah, there would have been a lot of human suffering, and there would be a lot of grandkids that would be struggling with broken marriages and whatnot from us kids. Like it would be bad. I mean, this world's already a rough place in a sense. Like there's so much brokenness all around. And, our family would have helped tip the scales to make it more broken than what the average would have been for sure. And yet that's not the case today. And so it's a beautiful contrast to see where we would have been based on the trajectory, based on what we see, I mean, and we've worked with over 100,000 people at this point in time across the world. And so you see patterns, and it's just interesting to see where some people have been and what they're healing from, and knowing that that would have been us.
It's something that you really don't like to think about, but it's always kind of a thing of, well, if this all didn't happen, where would we be now? And I think that um it was a blessing that it came. Before I had asked that question, you were kind of wanting to get into the next part, and you kind of build True Hope Canada as this company that helps with the research that you found. It's become one of the more widely studied natural products for mental health. It's been supported by 35 medical journals, but you said that it's been a kind of an interesting experience building this company up. You've had gun raids happen. So tell me a little bit about kind of some of the history of True Hope Canada, and what kind of the experience has been for you since starting a new business.
Absolutely. You know, it's an interesting thing in this world when you set out to do good and to share a blessing that you may have been a benefactor of yourself, right? And you go to share that with other people, and you even try to work through the system to make it available, through in Canada here, socialized medicine. So it'd be, in essence, free of charge, though it's not truly free. I mean, it's just covered through your tax dollars. But the fact of the matter is that it would be subsidized so that people would have easier access to it. And you try to go through those channels and you see how much opposition you come up against for something that seems so harmless, and yet it's making such a profound effect in people's lives. And that's exactly what we discovered. So, 1996, my sister and my brother have gotten well. People start to ask my father, "What have you done with your son Joseph? He's a completely different person." People could see it just by looking at him, his countenance, the way he carried himself. And my father would say, "Well, we use these four different products." And they would say, "Well, do you think it'd work, for my wife with depression?" My father said, "I don't know. Worked for his bipolar, worked for my daughter's bipolar. Try it out and work and see." And so people started trying it out for all sorts of things, ADHD and depression and anxiety. And it turns out that this broad array of nutrients, vitamins and minerals, were correcting all of these conditions. And my father and David Hardy are looking at this and they're saying, "Wow, we need to get this into the hands of the doctors. This is a medical breakthrough. Think of all the lives that could be blessed." And so they attempted to do that in their naivety, thinking that just because it's working, that it would be accepted. And so they went and approached a world-renowned neuroscientist out of the University of Lethbridge, so about 45 minutes from where I was growing up at that time. And they went and approached this world-renowned neuroscientist by the name of Dr. Brian Kolb. Reason why he's world-renowned, or one of the reasons anyways, is that he discovered that brain cell regeneration can take place. So they'd remove portions of a brain from a rat as a baby. They do this with a bunch of rats, and then they'd give them 22 vitamins and minerals, and they found that the brain would actually start to regrow, which is really quite amazing. And so it disproved the old theory that, or the old saying that when you have brain damage, the damage is done, meaning there's nothing you do about it. Well, no, it turns out that if you change the internal environment, that you can actually affect brain cell regrowth, even though that's still not commonly accepted in science today. Um, we'll get to that in a minute as to, well, actually, I'll just fast forward. He would eventually do a follow-up study using our formula, which I've got just a bottle there. This is the Canadian version right there, what it looks like. And they did a follow-up study using our 36 ingredient formula that would come out of necessity. Eventually, we develop it. And he actually found that full regrowth could actually occur using those 36 ingredients in the proper balance and the way that we're chelating them and making them bioavailable. And not only would regrowth take place, but when they measured their cognition, the rats that were on the Empower Plus found what they found is that they were actually outperforming, even though they'd had a brain injury 90 days beforehand, they were outperforming the control rats that never had a brain injury in the study. And so they were more highly performing than what a normal rat would be that was not previously compromised in relation to its cognition surrounding brain injury. And so, anyways, they approached Dr. Brian Kolb and said, "Hey, this is what we're finding. Do you think you could study this?" He said, "I don't do those kinds of studies, but Dr. Bonnie Kaplan of the University of Calgary does." So they went to approach her, and she was very skeptical and just said, "Look, I don't have the time to waste. I've already wasted enough time with all the flakes in the 80s regarding nutrition." And so Dr. Brian Cole was accommodating and said, "Look, here's the forms that they would typically use in these studies, symptom evaluation forms. You supply these to the people that'll be taking the supplements. I'm going to postmark them directly back to me so that when they're done with these, they're coming directly to me. They're not going to you, right?" So really keeping a good close eye on the chain of command, how you know these documents are being handled to ensure that there's no fraud. Within a few months, he gets some really significant reports coming back showing a significant reduction in the symptoms of these various mental health conditions. And he takes a look at it and says, "Wow, this is actually really quite amazing. I'm going to forward these on to Dr. Bonnie Kaplan and see what she has to say now." She took a look at it and said, "This is either complete snake oil and there's fraud going on, or we are onto a potential medical breakthrough." So what she did is she decided to study it. And she was studying the four different products and seeing significant results. And then halfway through the study, people's symptoms began to return, and the study was shut down when they discovered that one of the supplements, that the colloidal mineral supplement, varied in its levels of minerals depending on the upon the batch. And so it was a variable in itself. You can't study variable. So the study was shut down and we were left looking for a replacement. And after a year of trial and error, that's when finally my father and David Hardy just said, look, we need to make our own all-in-one supplement that's going to produce the results that we're looking for. And that's when Empower Plus was birthed. So in 1998. Now at the time, highly, it's highly, well, it was bioavailable. It was chelated. The minerals were chelated, which by today's standards is, that's good. Albeit the discovery across the board shows that not all chelates are made equal. Well, we already discovered this back in the late 90s. And so 48 capsules per day is what somebody had to consume of the Empower Plus if they had a severe mental health condition. And you'd think, well, that's a deterrent enough that nobody's going to do it. Well, it turns out there was a lot of people that were willing to do it because it was restoring their lives. They were willing to literally have a meal's worth of capsules every single day to get their lives back. And it was working. And so then in the year 2000, we changed the chelating agent and got it down to 32 capsules per day. And then I'll follow this real quickly just to end this portion, but then we'll get into the studies and then all the controversy that would come after that. So year 2000, we get down to 32 capsules per day. In 2001, we began micronizing the minerals. So it's the same formula, same ingredients, label reads the same. And now we're down to 18 capsules per day because we're micronizing it and chelating it. And then in 2005, we developed our own chelation technology and got down to 15 capsules per day. And then, 2013, we were able to get down a few more caps. In 2020, we really, really enhanced that micronization and chelation process. And now, even though the label reads the same as it did in 1998, you can literally take about 1/8 to 1/6 of the amount that you would have to back then and get the same results. So, just in our own generations of supplements, we've identified that not all nutrition is the same. And we've had to go through very extensive processes to make it that bioavailable so that people can take 6 capsules a day and have their lives turned right around, right? And if they're really extreme, yeah, give them 9 capsules per day, right? And we'll see their lives turned around. And so um, the product is produced and it's brought to Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, and she's excited to start another study, and this time having a very reliable source of nutrition that's not going to be a variable in itself. She begins to study it. Now, this is in the year 2000, and she gets so excited about the preliminary results that she has found that she actually publishes the preliminary results, and it goes national. It goes on to national television all across the country. That's what's on the 6 o'clock news is this study, and my father's being interviewed, and Dr. Bonnie Kaplan's being interviewed, talking about it. Her colleagues are being interviewed, and it's just this phenomenal thing. I mean, the headline was, is there a new hope for those suffering from bipolar disorder? Right? Like that's how um, the news anchor um, let in with it, and it was actually the top news anchor for CTV National News at that time, Lloyd Robertson. And so the very next day, Health Canada phones my father and says, "Who gave you permission to speak on television last night about what you're doing?" My father has to do kind of a double take and say, like, "Am I living in Bolivia here, or like there's something called free speech, or like what are you talking about?" And they went on to inform him that he was in contravention of Section 3.1 and 3.2 of the Food and Drugs Act. In order to help people with bipolar disorder, he required a drug identification number. Now remember, this is a multivitamin mineral. Like this is 36 ingredients. 33 of them you're getting out of your food every day, just not in adequate amounts, but you're getting 33 of these every single day unless you're fasting. And then if you're eating seeds or you're eating grapes with the seeds in them, you're getting the 34th ingredient. If you're eating some citrus, you're getting the 35th ingredient. And then there's ginkgo biloba, right? Like this is basically food. And yet Health Canada is saying you need a drug identification number because it's helping people with bipolar disorder. Well, that's interesting. So my father attempted to work with them for well over a year until they finally said, Mr. Stephan, because they weren't giving him the DIN number. And so they just said, Mr. Stephan, if you want to continue doing what you're doing, perhaps you want to move south of the border. And my father's like, whoa, 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 hold on. You're telling me that Canadians aren't deserving of a Canadian discovery that could largely impact their lives the way that my family's been impacted. And so he finally came to this resolve that he wasn't going to let some bureaucrat in Ottawa tell him whether or not he could share this God-given blessing that had restored our family, that they were going to prevent him from sharing it with others. There was no way. So he began to just ignore them when he saw that the agenda that they had. And, they would supply cease and desist orders, this, that. And eventually by early 2003, they came in and they shut it off at the border, preventing 3,000 Canadians from having access to it and created a major crisis. They actually created suicides over the matter because there was still some people that were a little unstable and there was no way that they were willing to go back to the medications and back to the psych wards. They were finally just getting that glimmer of hope in their lives, and all of a sudden they're being told by Health Canada that they won't have access to this anymore. And so rather than going back to that dismal quality of life they had before, they just said, it's not worth living life. And Health Canada was warned about this, that they were going to cause suicides. They were warned by Ron Lajeunesse, the head of the Alberta chapter for the Canadian Mental Health Association. So a complete independent organization. And he's saying, Health Canada, what are you guys doing? Like you've created instability in a number of the people that I work with. And so they came in like that, and then we would start protesting. And protests were happening across the country. And the day after we protested at the Federal Minister of Health's office, at her constituency office in Edmonton, they would, the week following that, they would send an RCMP SWAT team backed by 9 Health Canada agents, and they'd come conduct a drug style raid on our head office, where, just to kind of paint a picture here, you open up the glass doors, you walk into the building, and you're encountered first by a front desk, and what you see behind is all these nice, middle-aged ladies in cubicles with headsets on, supporting people from around the world, helping them to come off of their medication safely and effectively, while getting onto proper nutrition and getting their lives back. And all of a sudden, you've got RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, busting through those doors, guns drawn, and over that. Like, anyways, 2 days later, we'd be up and running again. But then they would charge us and we'd end up in the courts with them. We'd end up winning that court case. It was a 3-week court case where it was proven that our products did what we claimed they were doing, and that it was backed by now multiple studies, because even though Health Canada came in, they shut down every study in Canada. Now, at this time, so Dr. Bonnie Kaplan's really excited about her preliminary results, so much so that she's ended up with a grant from the Alberta government of $544,000. And that grant would go towards a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial to further substantiate the effects of these nutrients. And Health Canada would come in and shut that down, saying, no, you're not doing any studies on this. But yet that's one of the criteria to get the DIN numbers. You need the studies. And so Health Canada was actually preventing us from being able to get that DIN number. And so fortunately, in the US, there was researchers that found out about it. They started to study it, and they found the same thing. 3 times more effective than your standard antidepressants. And so now this evidence is coming forward in the courts from multiple expert witnesses saying, I studied it. This is what I saw. Charles Popper from Harvard, McLean's Hospital. He's a well-renowned psychopharmacologist and psychiatrist out of the U.S., out of Harvard. He's actually responsible for bringing lithium into North America as a treatment for child and adolescent bipolar. Lithium was his most favorite medication, and he found it to be most effective in depression. Now, when he ended up taking the stand, he had a major change of heart, because he's a psychopharmacologist and a psychiatrist. He lives and breathes the drug model. Well, he ended up becoming acquainted with our supplements, and he had a unhealthy level of skepticism. But kind of to keep it short, there was a long story surrounding how he eventually, would end up treating a 10-year-old patient. It was actually one of his colleagues' sons, and his colleague didn't want to put him on medications. And so, anyways, they tried it out, and he's like, I have no hope in this stuff at all. Like, it just, you don't want to put him on medications. Go ahead and try this. They were raving about it, but I don't believe a single word of it. And it worked. This 10-year-old was tantruming for hours every single day. And all of a sudden he gets on these supplements on the micronutrients on the Empire Plus, and his tantrums go away. And then they're about to run out, and they're about to go on a family vacation, and they don't want the son tantruming all over the place. And so, anyways, Charles Popper would get more involved, and then he would begin studying it, and he would come and testify during the court proceedings saying it's more effective than any medication or combination of medications that I've ever used. That's a pretty profound statement coming from somebody who's co-authored a lot of textbooks that psychiatric students will learn from today. And so we end up winning the court case and actually had a mandate given to us here in Canada that we had no choice but to disobey Health Canada, because had we conceded, had we listened to them, based on the harm that Health Canada demonstrated would occur if we were to withdraw those supplements, that we could have been held liable for criminal negligence, which is a pretty hefty fine, or not fine, sorry, hefty criminal charge here in Canada. It's actually up to 25 years in jail. And so we now have this mandate that protects us from Health Canada, even though Health Canada wants us out of existence. Now the courts are saying you have no choice but to disobey them, because human life is more valuable than upholding these statutes and regulations that Health Canada has in place that says that you can't be supplying this to people with bipolar disorder. And so that paved the road for us to continue to move forward, was that court victory, even though we haven't gone 5 years in our existence at this point in time without some kind of battle and Health Canada rearing their ugly heads in relation to our continuance of supplying simply these 36 ingredients in the proper balance and being micronized in such a way that you can actually absorb them and put them to work in your body. So it's been really quite a journey to do something good in this country, but it's definitely been well worth it.
So during this whole process and journey, what's been probably one of the biggest things you've learned about business and promoting a health supplement to a public and trying to prove to people that it does work? And how do you manage to, deal with everything, like with the gun raids, the ruling and kind of court system? How are you able to really manage and deal with all that stuff?
Well, we've really embraced the court proceedings. We've embraced the gun drawn raid. It's really identified that we've made a dent, that we are making a difference, because you don't get that kind of attention unless you're killing people or you're competing with the bottom line of the pharmaceutical industry. And it's definitely proven that it's the latter, that we are definitely taking a chunk out of the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, think of it, like over 100,000 people over the last nearly 3 decades that we've helped come off of psychiatric medications. Like that's a big chunk of business, you know. And so we've embraced it, and the court proceedings were phenomenal in this sense. I mean, it was terrible in the way that it highlighted that people died, that Health Canada actually caused people to die. But conversely, it was a really good thing in relation to what came out of those court proceedings that showed that our products actually did what we claimed they were doing, and that our support program, and Health Canada took major issue over this, the fact that we were supplying protocols to help people come off medications within months, right? It's actually sometimes even weeks, but weeks to months, that most people were able to come off their psychiatric medications. Health Canada took major issue over that. And yet that was established as well, where the courts heard that we were actually training psychiatrists on these protocols, because when they go to school, they're not learning how to take people off meds. They're learning how to put you on a med, and then if it doesn't end up working, then you transition them over to another psychiatric med. And then if that doesn't work, you transition them over to another psychiatric med. But either way, until they die, that client is going to be on psychiatric meds. And yet, here we had developed these phenomenal programs and protocols in relation to medication withdrawal to help, at that point in time, tens of thousands of people come off these medications. And so we had really refined our protocols as time went on. And now we're training doctors and psychiatrists from around the world on these protocols so that they can employ those protocols in their own private practice as well. Health Canada took major issue over that, but yet the courts upheld it and identified that we were, in essence, the experts in the field um, when it came to that. And so it's an unfortunate, when you take a look at the whole of what's going on in the natural health industry, it's a really unfortunate reality that we find ourselves in. Now, the US, they're doing a lot better than we are, but countries like New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and Canada, they're all headed down the same path and pretty rapidly. And so right now there's actually a major, major battle going on in Canada over regulations surrounding natural health products because Health Canada is trying to put them into more of a drug style directorate where we would be liable to the same types of fines that a massive multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company would be liable to. Where they're trying to penalize us with draconian measures, in a way that'll scare us right away. They're trying to apply the same type of regulations for approval processes. And when you're talking 36 ingredients, I mean, we got 36 ingredients in this formula right here, right? You got 30 in this one. There's no way that you can put it through the same hoops that you do a single or two ingredient medication. You'll never get it, each ingredient into the same threshold to be able to jump through those hoops. And so by pushing us into a drug style directorate, and that was the issue with the trying to get the DIN number all along as well, is that there's no way that you could have done it with the 36 ingredient formula. There's too many variables in relation to the exactness of how much ingredient is in every single capsule. And so it's just a model that can't apply, and yet Health Canada is trying to apply it because they know what it'll do to the natural health industry. And the very first thing it'll do is it'll jack the prices up of all the products that are available. Second thing is it'll make a lot less products available in the marketplace. And so now Canadians will have way less choice in relation to their own self-treatment. If they have a particular ailment and they decide, I don't want to go to the doctor for this, I'd rather go get a natural health product that doesn't come with all the side effects. Now they're going to be limited in relation to what they have direct access to. And that's a problem. And so their regulations, just like their actions against us, their regulations today, if they continue to proceed, will cost lives. People will die because of it, because they won't have access to the life-saving natural health products that they need.
Do you think that your company's kind of reached kind of the point where you've reached and done everything you would like? What's some kind of future goals you have for Truehope Canada? Are y'all planning on maybe trying to expand it to have more different products out there? Are you trying to get more countries to pick up the product? What's kind of some future ideas you have for the company?
When you look across the country here, especially in Western Canada, it's available. Our products are available in the majority of health food stores across Canada, but really well situated in the West. And there's a number of those stores where our Empower Plus has become their number one selling SKU, and for good reason. People try it, people love it, they come back and they purchase it again. They tell their friends. Boom. It kind of grows itself. And so when we look at it though, we still haven't even scratched the surface. And so we keep it pretty simple. We have 6 products right now available in the Canadian market. That's all. 6 life-changing products. There's all sorts of other great products out there. We're not in the business of trying to flood the marketplace with more Me Too's. We will only supply where there's a void in the marketplace. And so we have a phenomenal form of amino acids. We have a phenomenal vitamin mineral supplement that goes through that proprietary chelation and micronization process. We have an incredible bone health product that utilizes the same technology when it comes to the minerals. We have a form of nascent iodine, which is otherwise unavailable on the health food store shelves here in Canada. So we're really just filling the void as to where other companies aren't filling. But other than that, we oftentimes will just recommend people go get this version of, the omega fatty acids, right? Take it alongside the our Empire Plus. It'll work really good. And so we do fairly well with the 6 products that we have, which is a relatively small amount of products. And so we're not looking to flood the marketplace. We're really looking to penetrate the marketplace because there are so many people out there that don't know about True Hope and could sure use True Hope, that could sure use our supplement line to help correct their mental health conditions. And when we take a look at it, I mean, the rise of mental illness is probably rising faster than what we're catching, right? Faster than how faster than our company's growing. And that's a sad reality because, at the end of the day, I'd love to, see, I mean, this is basically quoting my dad from 23 years ago when the first documentary came out. Discovery Health Channel did a documentary. He said, he looks forward to the day that he can open up a history book and read that mental illnesses were a thing of the past and that they were identified as merely being nutrient deficiency disorders. Unfortunately, that is not the reality here now, 23 years later, after he made that initial statement. We are still barely scratching the surface. There are so many people that need to be helped. So we're really focusing in on our mandate, and our mandate is to correct mental health conditions, to restore people back to um, living beautiful lives where their quality of life is amazing, where their quality of their relationships is just rich, where they're able to connect with people in a way more meaningful way than they otherwise would have been able to do so when they were plagued with the mental health conditions. So we're still focusing in on that mandate. We don't want to take our eyes off of it. The periphery has grown a little bit over time where we now deal with severe thyroid conditions as well, and we do a fantastic job of correcting those, things like Graves or Hashimoto's even. Generally, we can correct those types of situations within just a handful of weeks. And we have people coming off their medications doing really, really well. But the reason why we've also covered off, addressing those is oftentimes mental health is associated with thyroid conditions. And so we've just started to kind of dive down these other areas to make sure that we can, when somebody comes to us and they want help, that we can supply them the adequate help necessary to get them well. And so that's our main focus. And there's just so many people out there that have yet to be helped. And so um, we're encouraged by the fact that we're able to continue to plow forward, but it's somewhat discouraging to see that given the circumstances, especially over the last 5 years, that mental health issues are on the rise, and that we still haven't really helped near the amount of people that we should be helping.
What would you like people to know about Truehope Canada? If someone is from a different country and they're just now learning this for the first time, what would you like for them to know about what you offer for them? If this is something that they are interested in trying and would like to potentially try to use to help with a bipolar disorder like it has helped your family.
hmm Yeah, so the first thing I'd like them to know is that first of all, mental illness with the stigma that comes with it is an unwarranted stigma. When we take a look at cancer and people that get cancer, we feel sorry for them. You know, if somebody ends up with diabetes, we don't criticize them typically, right? We may say, hey, lay off the sugar a bit, but you know, these things happen, like the type 2 diabetes, you know, and so they don't get the same criticism that somebody does that has mental illness. But when we take a look at these things, they're just all dysfunction in the body due to largely not having enough nutrition, right? That this kind of dysfunction arises and gets bad enough eventually, like a diagnosis of cancer, right? And so, one, mental illness is a nutrient deficiency disorder, just like type 2 diabetes is, just like type 1 diabetes is, even though people say, well, it's autoimmune condition. Yeah, we've seen it corrected. We correct a lot of autoimmune conditions. I already mentioned two, Hashimoto's and Graves, right? And so, it's a nutrient deficiency disorder. And it's as simple as this. When you put the proper nutrition into your mouth, you get it in there, whether it be capsule form or let's say you start growing your own garden and you were to resupplement the soil and you reintroduce life and go through all of this arduous process that we should be doing, by the way. I'm an advocate of that. But if you're to get the nutrition into you that you needed all along, you will find that a lot of this stuff will correct on its own. The vast majority of disease will correct on its own. And especially when we're looking at, things like the production of serotonin or dopamine, simple neurotransmitters that help regulate our mood. I'm going to break this down real simply so that your audience kind of figures this out so that they can see how vitamins and minerals work, because one of the things that many people said to us, especially doctors back in the past, they said vitamins and minerals don't do that. They don't correct mental health conditions. It's because the science hadn't caught up with it yet. The KEGG project, which is the Kyoto Encyclopedia of Genes and Genomes, had not yet mapped out a lot of these different pathways. And that project would start in 1996, ironically, the same year that we made this discovery. And so when we take a look at a neurotransmitter pathway like serotonin, you have tryptophan is your precursor. That's the backbone of everything. It's an amino acid. You have an enzyme, the tryptophan hydroxylase enzyme, that requires iron, methyl tetrahydrofolate or methylfolate for short, vitamin C, D, and then B3. So you have 5 vitamins and minerals needed to convert the tryptophan into 5-hydroxytryptophan. Then you have one enzyme reaction that takes the 5-hydroxytryptophan or 5-HTP and converts it into serotonin. And all you need for that one is P5P or pyridoxine 5-phosphate, which is activated B6. Okay, so now you have 6 vitamins and minerals needed to take tryptophan and convert it into serotonin. Now you're feeling better. Do you know that when you drink coffee, and this is why coffee can be such a drug to so many people, is that it's not just giving you an energy spike because of the caffeine, it's actually inciting serotonin production. That's why it gives you kind of that, it's the comfort drink, makes you feel nice and warm and all that, right? Serotonin, right? You're basically taking a drug in that sense. And that's why so many people are addicted to caffeine and can't kick it. Fortunately, when you take, the supplements that I do, you can drink coffee and you won't get addicted to it. Why? Because it actually is a little overpowering because you're already producing enough serotonin and feeling pretty good. And so, but I highlight that pathway, and the dopamine pathway is the same way, right? It just starts with L-tyrosine, but requires the same 6 nutrients to take tyrosine and turn into L-dopa and then dopamine. And so we see how vitamins and minerals are needed in the body, and you can't replace them with anything. You can't say, well, I'm iron deficient, so I'm going to go take cobalt, okay? Or I'm going to go eat this herb that doesn't have iron, but it does something similar to iron, or it's going to, right? Like you can't replace it. We have an innate need for vitamins and minerals. So when you ask the question, what would I want people to know from other countries when talk about Truehope, is we're supplying the fundamental nutrients that your body needed all along, and we're supplying them in a form that your body can actually use them to fill in the deficiencies that were causing this dysfunction, whether it's a mental health issue or whether it's a lack of production of maybe a hormone, um, like insulin, right? Or testosterone or estrogen, whatever it may be. The fact of the matter is that you need vitamins and minerals to produce hormones and neurotransmitters. And so when you don't, dysfunction will ensue, and that dysfunction will be manifest in a diagnosable disease, inevitably. And so that's all we're doing, is just supplying the proper nutrition that your body was looking for all along.
If people would like to learn more about this new, about your company, Truehope Canada, where can they go to find you, and most importantly, where can people support you? You also have a podcast called True Hope Cast. Tell me a little bit before I let you kind of close out. Tell me a little bit about the podcast and what people can expect when they hear True Hope Cast.
All right, cool. I'll work it backwards. So I'll address the trope cast first. So we do have a podcast, and we have about 200 episodes, is my understanding on it at this point in time, and where we interview a lot of people, a lot of doctors, people that have gone through bipolar or depression themselves, people that maybe deal with other complementary modalities that it would work alongside the Empower Plus and our line of products for mental health. And it's just a great place to get information on basically everything mental health. And so Truehope phenomenal podcast. You can find that if you go to truehopecanada.com. So that's truehopecanada.com. And you can find the podcast available on there. Now, as well, the question was, how can people support us? Well, first of all, if you want to support us, support yourself. Purchase the Truehope supplements, apply them to your life, and see what difference it makes. And now this isn't just about mental illness, right? That's what we've marketed them for because of their profound effects that we saw with them in our own lives, and then naturally that's the path that we went down. But remember, these are 36 ingredients, 33 of them that you get every day from your food, just not in adequate amounts. So if you don't have mental illness, guess what? Your body will still do better if you give it the nutrients it needs. And many people will find that their ability to be more resilient to stress increases significantly, that they can handle stressful situations far better than they otherwise would have beforehand. They find that their intellect increases, that their cognition increases, right? That they're able to do better in their studies or in their lines of work, whatever it is, whatever requires brain function, they do better. That their memory increases, energy levels increase. That's just the natural byproducts of taking good nutrition, right? Like your everything's going to thrive. Your energy level is going to increase. Like you just, yeah, like everything about you is going to change over time when you fuel yourself with the proper nutrients. And so if somebody wants to support us, support yourself, buy the products. That supports us. That allows us to have more money to make more products, to get it out to more people, to help more people. And you've been blessed in the meantime as well by taking the supplements. In relation to getting a hold of us or following us or learning more about us, truehopecanada.com if you're in Canada. And now Truehope.com is the international website. So if somebody's wanting to order the product, get their hands on the product, and they don't live in Canada, Truehope.com is where they want to go. But if they live in Canada, it's far more convenient to go to truehopecanada.com and you can find exactly where it's available across the country in various health food stores and naturopathic doctors' offices and that type of thing across the country. And there's also some really great resources available kind of exclusively on truehopecanada.com right now. They will be made available pretty soon on truehope.com, but right now, if you want to learn more about us, there's a phenomenal film that was just produced by an independent filmmaker. He looked at the story and said, this story needs to be told. And he entitled it Epiphany, the True Hope Battle. And it's available free of charge, actually. If you go to truehopecanada.com, and then there's a media button that you can click on the top, and it'll take you right there. And you can watch it. It's a 90-minute film. It's very emotionally compelling, very well done. If you're tempted to go sit down and watch some Netflix that evening, watch something that's going to be a little, more relevant to your everyday life, and that it's going to incite the same emotions. Like you're glued in. It is very, very well done. And so the reviews on it are just raving reviews at this point in time. We did a cross country tour for 36 days earlier this year, me and the producer, and went and showed it in movie theaters and community halls, churches across the country. And there wasn't a single person that came back and said, I wish I wouldn't have watched that, right? Like everybody was glued in and wanted to share it. They were buying DVDs after so that they could take it home and watch it. And I don't know how many people actually use DVDs anymore, but people were buying DVDs. So you can find that free of charge right now on truehopecanada.com under the media page. And I highly recommend you watch it because not only are you going to be glad that you did, but you're likely going to share it with those around you as well.
Well, David, I appreciate you so much for coming on here, and I will put off his links in the description box below so that if you would like to learn more about True Hope Canada, there will be links down there for you to go to where you can find them at easy access for you guys. Feel free to follow the podcast on all the social media accounts I have, Instagram and TikTok. Lethal Venom podcast for those two, and then Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It's Noah's podcast, so feel free to follow any of those platforms so that you'll get notified of this updates about the show on the social media side. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcast from. It's on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It is everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes like this drop. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. Y'all all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.